Obviously, it was incredibly upsetting and I would argue unnecessary. And it seemed very clear to me that the ICE agents had very little training, not the kind of training that we typically see here in Michigan with the Michigan State Police, with the county sheriff's departments, or even with the local municipal police officers. But what I find most concerning is this announcement from the Department of Justice that there's not even going to be an actual investigation into that matter. That has not been policy for the federal government. And it's certainly not our policy here at the Michigan Department of Attorney General. And I think people should know and understand that every single time there is an officer involved shooting or an in custody death, or even in most cases of any allegations of use of excessive force, we investigate those cases fully, even if it's a case where there is an obvious justification for the shooting on behalf of that officer. We still do a complete investigation, and that means we review all the, body cam footage, all the laboratory tests, the medical examiner's report. We interview all the witnesses. And we compile a very lengthy report where we review the facts, the evidence, and then also the applicable law. And after we make our determination as to whether or not that officer should be cleared for that particular event, we post it on our website so that everybody can know exactly what happened in that incident. And we do that because we want people to have faith and trust in the law enforcement officers that are there to protect and serve these communities. So for the feds now to have said, we're not even going to do the most cursory evaluation into this because nothing to see here, it's really a departure from what the federal authorities have always done. And it's incredibly concerning to me as the top law enforcement official in our state. Well, generally speaking, because of the supremacy clause of the United States Constitution, in many cases, it prohibits the state from levying charges and prosecuting a federal agent. And in the past, generally speaking, it has been the federal authorities that pursue those cases, and the Department of Justice and their Civil Rights Division generally who handle those cases. What's sort of an abnormality now is that you really have very few people who even work in the Civil Rights Department of the Department of Justice. I know many people who have been fired or who have resigned, retired, quit because they're being asked to do things that in many cases are illegal or unconstitutional. And you have, Kristi Noem herself, right, from the Department of Homeland Security. Immediately, not only did she say that this agent was justified in his actions before there'd been any kind of an investigation, but then she called the decedent in that case a domestic terrorist. These aren't people who are interested in the facts or the law or the truth or justice. They're interested in only furthering the goal of ICE being able to do whatever they want, wherever they want, under any circumstances that they want. And I think that's incredibly dangerous. It's dangerous for all of our individual states, and it's very dangerous to the notion of justice and equal treatment under the law in our country. Well, I will say this. First of all, I'm doing everything I can to coordinate with agents in our office, Michigan State Police, prosecutors around the state, county sheriffs, so that, we can do our best to do whatever we can within our power to hopefully ensure that doesn't happen. But that being the case, I think that ICE needs to be held accountable when they violate people's civil liberties. And for that, Congress really needs to get involved at this point. Congress has the ability to ensure that we have the proper guardrails around ICE. And that means things like, for instance, bills that are, have been proposed and are pending right now so that they have to wear proper uniforms and cannot mask their faces, which causes a lot of concern and distrust, and also people impersonating ICE when they aren't ICE and committing crimes against people. But in terms of their training, there's no reason why ICE officers shouldn't have to go through the same vetting process and the same training process as all other federal officers, which we're not seeing right now, and I think is contributing to this. For me personally, I'm trying to tell people here in the state of Michigan, you have every right to protest and to exercise your First Amendment rights, but please do not do anything illegal that would cause the president to invoke the Insurrection Act. And to militarize our streets even more so than we're already seeing. Obviously, the ICE agents, when they're doing their job properly, they have a right to be protected in the work that they're doing. But the problem is we are seeing them behave in such a manner that they're, inciting more fear, and I think they're inciting the public to behave in a way that they otherwise wouldn't and haven't traditionally. So this is a multifaceted approach, but this is not how a federal law enforcement agency should be behaving. They're creating more problems than they're solving. Well, that bill was sponsored by, our two United States senators, Gary Peters and Alyssa Slotkin. Unfortunately, I've not heard that there's a lot of movement so far on those bills. I hope there will be. I will tell you, I have been working in the criminal justice system for over 30 years, and I've almost never seen law enforcement mask themselves. And I think it really contributes to this feeling of distrust and many other concerns. But there are so many different ways that Congress can rein ICE in. ICE has been around obviously for decades, and they have a job to do. They're just doing it so poorly that it's leading to a fundamental distrust in anything that they do. So, it's important that they behave like real law enforcement and not like, thugs or criminals. Yeah, I mean, if there is a proper arrest warrant or there is a proper search warrant that is signed by a court of law, then obviously, they have certain rights to either arrest people or to search a household. But what we're seeing is that they don't have those types of warrants in place. And in those set of circumstances, there's no obligation for a person to have to cooperate with an investigation. Sadly, we have seen, the courts say that you can detain a person based on reasonable suspicion, really just based on the color of a person's skin, which is pretty horrifying. But I will say that, there is no right on behalf of ICE or the federal agents to, bust into a person's house or to detain a person without that reasonable suspicion. And I would argue that it's set a really bad precedent to say that a person's skin color can somehow contribute to that, or even a person's accent, without any further information that that person is in this country illegally. I'm really glad you asked that question because traditionally, the way that ICE has operated and other federal agencies is that they coordinate specifically with the state and local law enforcement entities. Because, of course, you want to know what's happening in that community so that you can help support those operations if need be. Or at least that if there are these, masked agents running around, that they're legitimate. And again, it's not somebody who's just impersonating law enforcement that's actually, robbing or kidnapping people. We've seen a lot less of that in Trump's second term in office. Now, I'm not going to say that ICE never contacts the state or locals to let them know what's going on, but I don't think it's a practice that they follow very closely. And it is creating, I think, more danger to themselves. Now, think about it. If they were to contact the state police, county sheriff, local law enforcement, and say, hey, listen, we have these warrants, we're going to be executing, and we could use some backup, then I think that we could do much more to keep those ICE agents safe and to keep the public safe. But if they're not even going to tell us what they're doing, then it creates this frenzy where you have people who are calling 911 because they don't know what's going on. And you're creating a very dangerous set of circumstances that does not have to exist. So that coordination has always been important, and it's important now. Yeah, I've heard the same reports. I think that the media has. I've heard of certain actions in the Ann Arbor area. I'm aware of certain actions that have taken place in Detroit or Grand Rapids, and I am hearing about some things also further to the west side of the state. But I don't know that they're going to make us aware generally, except for the fact that sometimes we'll see an announcement by the president. Sometimes we'll see an announcement by the Department of Homeland Security. I'm not thrilled with the language that I'm seeing because it doesn't speak to, we're trying to protect communities, but, to promise retribution against an entire state. I mean, that's not the way that our federal government should be communicating to our state residents. That doesn't sound like they're trying to protect us. It sounds like they're trying to persecute us. And I don't know why they would engage in that kind of language, but it's very disturbing. And we're also seeing a lot of phrases, a lot of terms, a lot of imagery that, uh, is reflective of white supremacy organizations. And I don't think that's very helpful either. And it's shocking, and I don't think any of us should tolerate that. Well, it's changing the court rule to specifically prohibit those types of law enforcement actions in courthouses around the state. And why it's important is this: we want people to show up to court, whether you are a victim on a criminal case, maybe you're a witness, you saw a homicide, a sexual assault, an armed robbery, so forth. Whether it's a civil case that's being litigated between parties, no matter what kind of case it is, you want people to show up for their court cases. And if people are so afraid that they're going to be, tackled and arrested when they enter a courthouse, they're simply not going to show up. We're seeing this in real time right now with our, we have the Human Trafficking Commission is housed within the Department of Attorney General. And we're seeing the number of cases of human trafficking, we're seeing that increase, the number of cases that are successfully solved and prosecuted decrease in large part because people are afraid to come to court. And this is not just people who are not United States citizens. We're seeing people who are afraid to come to court because they think they're going to be racially profiled and maybe they don't have their passport or their birth certificate handy, so they're just not coming to court. Now, imagine if you are a crime victim, somebody robs you at the local convenience store, and you have witnesses there who are saying, like, I'm not going to come in. I saw the whole thing, but if I come to court, I don't know if I'm going to get arrested or not. So I'm just not going to come. I mean, that's bad for any kind of component of the justice system and any kind of case that you're talking about. We want people to have their cases heard in court, and we want people to show up for those cases. The other thing that I've heard is that when you have these kinds of activities taking place at the courthouse, it actually interferes with the operation of that courthouse. So, for instance, I've talked to judges who have these arrests taking place in the hallway, and they can't conduct the business of the court inside that courthouse because of all the yelling and the screaming. And then people tend to just run out of the courthouse and leave. So it actually interferes with our judicial processes in a number of different ways. And I will say this, up until this time recently, courthouses always were protected, and ICE did not make arrests in our courthouses, state or federal. And somehow they were able to do their job in the past. They can do their job again. There is plenty of opportunity in the event that, again, you have an arrest warrant for somebody to execute that. But to do it in the middle of court, to do it in the middle of a courthouse, I think is really damaging to our justice system. Yeah, you have described such a scary set of circumstances, right? Where people who are here completely legally and, are American citizens, and they're afraid to leave their homes simply because of the color of their skin, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here. And that's not the way that America ought to operate. Obviously, I would advise people that if you have those documents, if you have your birth certificate, if you have a passport, if you have anything else that would allow somebody to quickly and easily determine that you're an American citizen, probably best practices, unfortunately, at this point, to bring that paperwork with you everywhere you go. But the fact of the matter is, you shouldn't have to. I leave the house virtually every day. I never bring with me my birth certificate or my passport. Just haven't throughout the course of the many years that I've existed on planet Earth, on which I've always been an American citizen. Why are we creating a double standard depending on what you look like for some people versus other people? I mean, that's just absolutely abhorrent. But the problem that you've described, it really interferes with every element of a person's life. So I know all of these people, American citizens, but they are not even taking advantage of programs that they need that they're eligible for because they're afraid that something bad is going to happen to them. People who aren't even taking their kids to school or to a doctor's appointment because they're afraid of being, illegally detained when they do that. I mean, it's creating this climate of fear that is reminiscent, of dictatorships, of banana republics. This is not how America should operate, and it's not how Americans should live. This climate of terrorism, it's literally terrorism that's being inflicted upon us by our federal government, and it's not right. Yeah. I mean, first of all, ICE doesn't have to operate this way. They can go back to operating under the protocols and procedures that they always did. But I would like to see Congress pass very specific laws about, who is eligible to become an ICE agent, what kind of vetting has to be done, what kind of training they have to receive. I would like to know that there's going to be accountability in the event that ICE officers violate people's civil liberties and their constitutional rights. I'd like to see Congress say you're not going to receive any more funding until we can be assured that you're acting in concert with our laws and you're not violating people's rights. Again, ICE should be able to do the job that they were assigned to do, but they don't have to do it in a way where they're terrorizing entire communities. And I think that's the important thing. You can care about ensuring that our immigration laws are followed without wanting to terrorize people all across the United States. You can do both at the same time.